Hello, Melissa. Welcome back. Thank you. I've got Melissa, everyone here from LULULiV Property Management. How you been?
Great. Thank you, Leigh. I appreciate you inviting me back today. It's always good to chat, so thank you.
Oh, look, great conversations. Our last conversation got a lot of traction online, so obviously a lot of valuable content out there. So I think it's important that we inform people so they can make better decisions in their life,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And look, I think, we were just chatting before, and I guess it's one of those things when you're kind of in it every day and doing it, you
Hmm.
kind of accept and understand the process. But for people who aren't in it every day, obviously, and most people looking for rentals aren't in it every day, the process may not be clear and it may not be that easy to understand how to put yourself in a position where you can be most successful. So it's
Yeah,
always good to have a chat about that and share some of the
absolutely.
insights that you see. Yeah.
So let's talk about that today. We want to talk about tenancy applications. As you and I are both aware, um, the demand for rentals is high
Yeah.
and the vacancy rates are very low. So there's a shortage, right?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, definitely. Look, and that's a consistent theme that we see everywhere. I mean, as we talked last time, we are in quite a broad area, so covering 3 states, but there's very few areas and markets that we operate in where that's not the case. So shortage of properties, low vacancies, and that just makes for a very competitive environment for people
Yeah.
looking for a rental. And I think that's the thing. It's like when you think about it from that perspective, obviously you're looking for a home, but you are competing with other people to secure that property. And quite often there can be a significant number of applications. And at the end of the day, there's only one home.
Hmm.
So only one family or one group who's going to be successful to secure that property.
Yeah.
So what I was sort of alluding to before is, as we work in that system all day, every day, and we understand the process, if I can just share a little bit about what that process looks like, that
Yeah,
might
let's
just
do
help
that.
people.
That's good.
Yeah, perfect. So I think that, I think there's probably a few key things that people need to think about when they're approaching the rental market. What I always encourage people to do when they come to me and they're looking for a rental is to register and create a profile with the portals such as realestate.com and Domain. On those platforms, you can go and set up an account, and then
Yep.
you'll be notified of properties as they come on the market that meet your criteria.
Yep.
And I think that's really important because whilst agencies do have lists of people looking for properties, and obviously they do have properties and are aware of properties coming to the market, in this highly competitive market, most landlords that we deal with will want to go to the market to find a tenant.
Yes.
So going to the market in those predominant platforms such as REA and Domain and registering with those platforms, I think gives you the best opportunity to get most properties as they come to the market.
As they come
So
up.
being
So
aware, yeah, yeah.
realestate.com and Domain, are they the two key platforms? Are there other platforms that people might not be aware about, as far as rentals are
Um,
concerned?
Look, for us as an agency in the states that we operate in, we actually only advertise through realestate.com at the moment,
Yeah.
even in New South Wales. We could, I mean, in Queensland for certain, realestate.com is the dominant platform. And so I think if you're going to do one, I would go with the biggest.
Yeah.
And then I guess go from there at the end of the
Okay.
day. Yeah.
So they're the two platforms. And you think, I suppose you touched on that most landlords would prefer to market their property. Why is that? Why would landlords prefer to do that rather than maybe tapping into an off-market source of tenants?
I think it's because there's just such a large pool of people looking. It
Yeah.
gives them more choice.
Yeah.
And I think that at the moment, because the vacancy rates are low, the vacancy is low. So
Hmm.
if you put your property on the market, even though it might take a couple of weeks to rent, it really, if it's priced well and presented well, it shouldn't be taking, several weeks to find a tenant. So in
Two
my
to three
experience,
weeks. Yeah.
yeah, look, I mean, obviously, sorry, it's gone dark here. Obviously, all markets are different.
Yeah.
And you can actually, one of the things that we do through realestate.com, you can actually go and have a look at a suburb profile. And through
Hmm.
those suburb profiles, you can have a look at, for example, 3-bedroom units, and it will give you the information around the median rents as well as the median number of days on market. So you can kind of get a sense from there, typically how long things take to lease in a particular market from those sort of data sources.
Okay.
But that is definitely our experience. We obviously do rent things off market. That does happen.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not the majority of the work that we do.
No, and it'd be the same with sales too. I mean, we have a lot of vendors that potentially like the idea of bringing buyers through off market, but it's always recommended that they market the property to make sure that they find the best suitable buyer for their property.
Yeah.
So that's one part of the process as far as finding the right home is registering yourself on realestate.com and domain. What are the next steps here to make sure they're at the forefront of their application being successful?
Yeah. So once the property is advertised, and particularly through those platforms, you can register your interest to get an application for the property or view the property or just get more details about the property.
Yeah.
And for us, the way that works is that connects back to our system here, and then we're aware of the people who are interested in the property. So you've seen the property online, you're aware of it obviously coming to the market, and then you've registered interest to get more information or go through the property.
Yeah.
I think that's really important because at least the way our system works is that once you've done that, as soon as we publish an open home, then you'll be automatically notified of that open home. So I think that's a key thing, to be in the market, aware of what's going on, and obviously when that open home is published, to attend.
Okay.
Some agencies, and we do it as well.
So those applications are agency specific. There's not a generic application that is shared by all agencies?
No, they're different application providers. They're definitely there's definitely dominant providers in the market where you can then share information between properties. So for example, our application provider, our leasing provider is Snug. And so if you have a Snug profile and you apply for 23 Smith Street, but you then decide you like 10 John Street, well, then you can just point your application from 23 Smith Street to 10 John Street. You don't have to do it again.
Yeah.
But then if you had an agency that didn't use Snug, you would then need to go and through whatever their
process.
Application is, go through their process.
Okay.
But I mean, in terms of applications, like broadly speaking, they're really going to be looking for a number of key things. So firstly, it's going to be about proof of income. So that could be employment income. Obviously, people are on government benefits. If it's Centrelink benefits, those sort of statements, any investment income they might have, business income. I mean, that can be quite a tricky one because you don't have pay slips. So letters from accountants and things like that, BAS statements, anything that supports your ability to pay the rent at the property is going to be important to incorporate in the application. The other thing that people are looking that you need to provide is information around your address history. And so if you've rented before, one of the things that will happen is when you include your address history, you'll also be required to include the agency that you rented through if it was through an agent.
Right.
And that agency will be requested to provide a rental reference. That rental reference is quite an important part of the process because that agent is basically going to tell us or tell the agency where the property is listed whether or not the tenant met their leasing obligations under the lease when they managed the property with them in the property.
So have your address history. So if you were previously renting at a property, make sure you have the property address, the agency that you rented through, and a letter of reference from them.
Well, you'll actually include their details. Most of the references are done online.
Yeah.
So through these systems, so obviously they manage that reference.
So you just include their details, and then the agency will request the reference.
Exactly, yeah. So just with that, what's important is that you have the right contact details for the agency.
Yeah.
So
what happens if the agency's changed or something? You know, I know back in the day when I had some rental, it was just like, I don't know the past addresses, and it was just too much to get all the information. What do you sort of advise there if things have changed and you just can't remember?
So you can't remember where you lived?
Well, like if the agency's changed or closed down or sold their rent roll.
I mean, obviously these things, they do happen, obviously. And
Mhm.
I think that what you can always do is call the agency who you think's managing it now. That would be one thing. You
Mhm.
can obviously call the agency that managed it before and see, and see if they can provide you with different contact details.
Okay.
I think the thing is that it's about being proactive, right? So it's a competitive market, and I
Yeah.
understand it can be onerous to bring the documentation together, but
Yeah.
it's the same documentation you need: proof of income, address history, references. So
Yeah.
it's the same information. The application form might look different, but it's essentially the same. So if you've got your documentation together and you're proactive about getting the documentation together and you can submit that, what you're essentially doing is ensuring your application is as complete as possible.
Yeah.
And that's what's key, right? So when, let's say we've got three people applying for three people in a group applying for a property, and the first person, the primary applicant, they're super organized, they've gone in, they've completed their application, they've attached all their documents, and applicant 2 and applicant 3, well, they're just a little bit less organized. The application can't be processed until everyone's applied. So
Okay.
if you've got, and I think that's really important, because when you apply as a group, whether it be a couple or a group of people coming together, the group of people or the couple, they are responsible for the lease, and their application as a group is what is approved or not approved. So therefore the group application needs to be complete, not just
Mhm.
one of the parties.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's important to remember as well. And the other thing I would say with references, I mean, we do ask for personal references.
Yeah.
If you're putting someone down as a referee, let them know. Let
Yeah.
them know that you've done
Yeah.
that. Let them know that they should expect to receive a rental referee request,
Yeah.
so that they're aware of it. And look, I mean, I've done these references for other people I know, like personally, and it takes seconds
Yeah. It's
sometimes to
simple.
do
It's pretty
this.
straightforward.
It's
Yeah.
so simple. And that might be the difference between the person you know securing a property and not. So I
Yeah.
think it's that being proactive, you know, making sure that, again, if you are putting Fred Smith down as a referee, you give Fred a call and let Fred know,
Yeah.
I've just applied for 10 John Street, Fred, you're going to get a reference request. Please help me out here. I'm really trying to get this property.
Good old Fred.
Yeah, good Fred.
If you haven't rented before, so you've owned property or been overseas and you just come back here, obviously you can provide some addresses potentially, but no references from an agency. You just still provide some references that are relevant. Like,
Yeah.
can that be friends, work, colleagues?
Yeah.
Who do you recommend there?
Yeah, so it could be those types of people, friends, work colleagues. It could be, like, for example, if you've owned a home, maybe you've been a landlord before. So you could always put down the property manager of your investment property to provide a personal reference.
Yeah.
If you've been overseas and you've recently relocated back to Australia, you probably don't have local employment history. So it's going to be important that you include things like, you know, maybe your employment contract here, or maybe you've moved with a company from overseas back to Australia.
Yeah.
So proving that connection, and all of that is sort of establishing who you are as a person and why, and obviously supporting why an owner would want to choose you to go into the property.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be a case of, well, I've not rented before, so I don't have a rental history, therefore I can't apply. That's absolutely not the case.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, as an agent, our role is to secure the most suitable tenant for the property. And as we go through that process, we're really checking for two things. Is the property affordable? And does the person applying have the history of being able to take care of a property?
Okay. What about things like the family setup or number of applicants that are coming in the house, pets, things like that? Does that all need to be included in there? Is there pros and cons to doing it or not doing it?
Well, my recommendation is always to be upfront, but I guess that's my personality as well. So I would always be approaching it to be as honest, obviously, and
Yeah.
complete as possible. If you've got kids, you disclose it. They're people that will be living at the property, and at the end of the day, they also need to be included in the lease.
Yeah.
If you've got pets, then they also need to be included in the lease as well.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, you've got the distinction between the people who are responsible for the lease, so they're the applicants.
Yeah.
And then you've got the people who are also living at
Make up the
property.
household. Yeah.
Exactly.
So include
So
all
it
that,
might
be
be-
upfront.
Yeah.
Do personal letters help? I know a lot of people, I've come across it in sales at least, you know, writing up a personal letter about their family or demographic, what they do. Does that help in your applications, do you find?
Yeah, so we always, sorry, we always.
You're in a tent there or something. What's going
No,
on?
I'm not in a tent. I feel like I should be. When you submit an application, at least through the provider that we use, you can include a bit of a story about yourself. And I'm sure most providers have that option. I think it's good to do that. We share that with the owner, just as a way of giving context to what otherwise is a very sort of dry, I guess, process. I think it's good that people understand who you are.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's a relationship. So
yeah,
I would encourage you to do that. You know, you don't have to write, you know, a huge long story, but I just think enough information to give an insight as to why that home is a home that you want to live in, and how that fits for your whole lifestyle.
Okay. Some good information there, Melissa, on improving your tenancy applications. Is there anything that we've missed that you think is critical to help people in this competitive space improve their application?
I think the only thing I'd just reiterate is to be proactive.
Yeah.
So go to the open homes.
Yeah.
Ask questions if you're not sure.
Yeah.
Call the agency if you're not getting feedback. And it is really about making sure that your application is as competitive as possible. So as complete is one thing, but yeah, make sure that you don't leave anything out that's relevant.
It's almost like applying for a job, really.
Well, it's an application, right? So yeah, and it is, you know, we've said a couple of times now, it is competitive. So put your best foot forward.
What about, and I've heard this from various people, and you can share some insights into this, but as far as, you know, paying rent in advance or going above, I know there's some regulations around this now, but, you know, offering above the asking price and things like that. What is being done in that space?
So the legislation in Queensland changed last month around those two topics. So you are no longer able to put a lease on a property which is more than the advertised price. So that's really to stop rent bidding.
Yep.
Where you might have a property advertised at 700 and someone applies at 750. Okay, so you can't do that anymore. If the property's advertised at 700, you can only put a lease in place at 700.
At 700 or under.
Or under, yeah, of course, but not over. Yes.
So what are you finding landlords approaching that a bit differently then, by maybe, again, it's not without being greedy, I suppose, but just, you know, by testing the market, because sometimes it's uncertain where that price might fall. So a landlord might go, well, I'll put it at 700 and then bring it back if I need to.
Yeah, I think that's generally what would happen anyway.
Yeah.
Prices can be all over the place.
Yeah,
as you know, it's very similar to the sales market.
Yeah.
But what this legislative change does is prevents people being outbid for properties.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's good.
So I think that's really an important shift, and that happened at the beginning of June. The other change that happened at the beginning of June was that you can no longer accept an application where more than 1 month's rent is paid up front. So what we would have seen prior to that change, for example, is properties on the market for $700 a week. An application comes in at $750 a week with an offer to pay 6 months rent up front. That's no longer possible. So
yeah, I did that when I got back from overseas, actually, and we paid like 6 months in, you know, something. Yeah, ridiculous.
Yeah. So that's no longer an option. Once the tenant's in the property, if they offer to pay more rent up front in advance, they can, but it can't be, well, obviously the agency can't ask for that or encourage that, but the agency also can't accept that as part of the condition, obviously, of them moving into the property.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing that changed at the same time, beginning of June, was that rent increases are only possible once every 12 months on a property. So that's regardless of whether or not the property has changed ownership. It's regardless of what the situation was of the previous tenants, but it's once every 12 months. You're now limited to increasing the rent.
Is there a limit to what you can increase it by?
It has to be fair and with the market. So,
Okay.
yeah. And I mean, if that goes back, I mean, that's not new. At the end of the day, if you're living in a property and you're offered a new lease and the rent increase is not fair with where the property is placed in the market, then obviously the tenancy association can support tenants with how to handle that. That's not an acceptable practice.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much. That's been awesome. Great information
Thanks, Leigh.
here today shared.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Have a great Friday.
You too. You got some things happening today, like we all do. So it is Friday. I get excited about today. So enjoy it yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Leigh. Take care.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.